This is TWiT.
Xbox. Last week, I know, was a downer for people. This week is a little more interesting. On Sunday, Microsoft had their annual Xbox game showcase.
Hey.
I don't know if you could figure out off the top of your head what happens when Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard and then has to show off new games, but suddenly they have a lot of new games. So,
Really?
yeah, and this might have been one of the better Xbox showcases, maybe the best of all time, frankly. A lot of good stuff. Activision stuff, like, Call of Duty, the next Call of Duty, obviously, but just games that have been in the Microsoft kind of Xbox Studio sphere for a long time. State of Decay, Fable, Perfect Dark. Remember, Perfect Dark Zero was a launch title on, I think, the 360. It's a hard time remembering that far back.
Wow.
Anyway, there's a new Gears of War game, and it's not a continuation of the current storyline. It's actually going back to the origin story from before the original trilogy. So you've got younger versions of the characters from the, Dom and what's the name of the guys? Marcus, from the first game, etc. Stalker, Assassin's Creed. That's just a lot of stuff coming. So that's great. Couple of weird things. So I love Phil Spencer. I want to be clear about that, and I say that in kind of an unreserved way. However, in the same way with some other people, I just like, if there's one thing, he has this way of, he's a gamer. He's as partisan as he has to be to work for Microsoft, but he just loves games, and he wants games to be everywhere. This is real. It's not like a marketing thing. And he was interviewed in the wake of this game showcase, and someone said, "Hey, these companies are all doing these little gaming handheld things. Like, why doesn't Xbox have one?" And then he does this thing, which he does, which I know he means non-maliciously, but he said, "Yeah, we should have a portable gaming console."
Oh God!
It's like, dude, you run Xbox.
Alarm bells.
What are you doing? You don't have one coming.
You should talk to your boss about that.
We gotta have one of these. Yeah.
Yeah, you can talk like a guy sometimes, but in your role as the guy in charge of that business, I mean, maybe don't say that. know. So
did he actually follow it with "I never thought of that" thing?
Well, you don't want to look that dumb, but the other thing he admitted to, of course, was that Microsoft will be bringing more games to the PlayStation in the future. And this is later in the notes, I think. But one of those games is almost certainly the original version of Halo, right? So that game has already been remastered as part of the Master Chief Collection. Apparently, it's going to be remastered yet again, and as part of that work, supposedly, it'll be coming to PlayStation 2. And you know what? Yeah, of course. I mean, that makes sense to me. Okay. The other thing they did, and God help us all, they announced 3 new Xbox consoles, which, in any normal world would be big news.
Yeah.
Except what they announced was 3 look-alike Xbox Series X and S refreshes that are just color and or storage allotment changes. Nothing else is different.
This one's purple.
The one that has 2 terabytes of storage was, I guess, bedazzled or something. There's like green specks on it for some reason.
Wow.
So I guess that makes it different. And
2 terabytes, it makes you glow.
Yeah. So what is it? So these things are, I guess they're coming out soon. So it's 2024. So we're not even like halfway through this console generation, assuming it follows a normal pattern, which it won't. We know they're going to refresh, if only to lower cost, right?
Yep.
But 2 things. Sony is coming out with the PlayStation 5 Pro this year.
Right.
With a better GPU, et cetera. So that's a problem. These things don't match up against that at all. And there was a big leak last year. And the Xbox Series X refresh in particular was very impressive and is not this thing that they just announced. Now, at the time of the leak, Phil Spencer said, look, these were an idea. We had at one time. These are not our plans. Plans change. Don't believe that this is what's going to happen. The other thing that changed is that there was also, as part of the leak, is that Microsoft was looking at using ARM as the basis for their next generation console.
Right.
Not a refresh, right? But an actual next gen. So following the refresh. If you look at their, like the current generation of consoles, which is Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, is referred to as like the generation or Gen 9 consoles. Previous gen obviously was 8, right? So Xbox One, Nintendo Switch was part of that, still around. PlayStation 4. There's something weird going on here. Like Xbox 360 was a generation. Original Xbox was a generation.
Yep.
I kind of feel like Xbox One and Series X and S are actually the same generation, because it's not that there aren't any games that so far don't run on one, but most games that run on Xbox today target all three of those consoles.
Right.
And I mean, I get it, but at the time, Xbox One was considered kind of a disaster. It was kind of we were hoping the nadir, if you will, of that line. Mm-hmm. But now, I think the Xbox Series X and S are much better consoles, but they are not selling well at all. So I'm wondering if there isn't some calculus going on here where we're going to cut this one off at the knees and move to whatever that next gen console is, whether it's ARM-based or not, a little sooner than maybe we would have otherwise. And that this refresh is almost a way of telegraphing. It's like, this is what we got. This is what we got. Mm-hmm. Like we're doing this, So I don't know. We could look forward to, this fall, this holiday season, and we look at the games and see. I bet most of them run on Xbox One still.
Yeah. Well, that's got may not be a lot of new consoles sold. What's the current population?
Yep.
And what's hard to code for?
But Xbox One is that's the thing. I'm not an Xbox developer. I'm not a developer really either. But I'm sure that the Xbox SDK, whatever they call it, makes it easy for a developer to target those three levels of performance and capabilities in a seamless way, right?
Well, you really just build to the low one, and you have some knobs to turn stuff up if you want.
Yep.
And by the way, they're essentially PCs under the hood, so you run this.
Yes, right. They're x86 based or whatever. Yep. Yeah. So that will change, with ARM if they go to ARM.
That's the proposal, right?
So we'll see. So kind of interesting.
The thing that actually pushes them over, and this also speaks into, maybe I'm stealing some thunder here.
Yeah.
The role of LLMs and generative AI in gaming.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, yeah. So
if you actually want to justify a new generation of hardware, that would do it.
But so in other words, like let's say this happens, it's a couple of years later. So we've got some future Call of Duty game, whatever it is. It's going to run on Xbox Series X and S and whatever this new thing is, right? It's going to run on PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro, and maybe they have a 6 by that point, whatever. Those games are different games, right? Even though it's the same game title, the game they've created is probably a different game. Like, I know there's shared code and all that stuff, but it's two different platforms, right? But the thing you're describing is actually very interesting to me, because one of the things about on-device AI is you have this capability to create worlds on the fly on device, which is not something you're going to be able to do on a current gen console, right?
Right.
So there are going to be games when that happens, if that happens. Well, it is going to happen, right? It's going to happen regardless of ARM, right? I mean, at some point we're going to have on-device models, right?
The argument it would be, what if the storyline was generated text? So every version of the storyline was a little bit different. You could write no more, selection options for responses. You can write back anything you want.
And it makes a game that might otherwise have been non-replayable very interesting as a replayable title. Maybe.
Yeah, once you have 4 options for each of these things, you rapidly just build a tree and make sure you go down them all. But what if you could write whatever or say whatever?
Yep.
Right now we only talk to other players, but why wouldn't we talk to the game?
Yeah. Right. There'll be some random character in the background that wasn't fleshed out in any way, shape, or form, but because you walked up to him, you're like, yeah, no, I know the game's over here. I'll be right back. And they'll generate a whole world for that guy that will be unique to that pass of the game. Yeah.
Yeah. And you talk about replayability and gameability, like that's all pretty compelling.
Yep.
You're always going to have the challenge of trying to get somebody back on the storyline because they didn't ask the right questions.
Video games have a rich history of like railing people into certain, so.
Oh no, you're going to play him.
So
folks who played Last of Us.
An open world game will essentially have primary and side quests.
Yep.
This is just an advanced version of that, I guess. Really, right?
I would think that a Bethesda is looking at this and going, "Wow, I could just change the whole concept of dialogue."
Yeah.
The joke is tokenization. The dialogue will actually be smaller.
You're also going to have people who would never play video games or would never play that type of video game who are going to wander off in an open world and just enjoy the scenery. They just talk to animals and look at trees and they're going to have their own little experience. Like
I knew guys who back in the Ultima Online days just built their little houses out in the woods and that's where
lived there. They lived there. Right.
Yeah, and they'd meet their friends online in a tavern to drink beers.
That's amazing.
I once watched an entire performance of The Wizard of Oz.
Oh God.
in the game.
So these are the
hundreds of people watching.
Like the pandemic was not even a thing for these guys.
No,
The rest of us were forced to do this. The awkward Zoom meetup, or whatever. We're like, oh, look, I'm drinking a beer too. It's fun.
Yeah, there you go.
Not really.
Well, and now you start thinking about this technology, and like, I think about the resource allocation for voice.
Yep.
And suddenly I'm like, now I can build a model for each of the different voices, and I have this gigantic LLM for all of this, and let's go.
One of the things Microsoft, I felt, has been a little indelicate about, frankly, has been kind of bragging about this thing no one can prove, which is like, we got hardware coming down. It's going to be the most powerful thing in the world. They've been saying that a lot lately, and I wonder if that's not the type of thing they're talking about. No,
and let's face it, they're uniquely situated to now build a console. With a 200 TOPS processor in it. And they own the studios to make games, to drive those games. Hey, can't put it on the PlayStation, won't run.
Wow. That could be. Yeah, maybe we got the cart and horse backwards. Maybe that's the plan.
You've got the studios, now make a console that just lives by itself. I mean, goodness knows you've now made these PCs that you're hyping hard to do all these things. Why would you do it with a gaming console?
Right. Okay. Food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's me, Leo Laporte. I hope you've enjoyed this little snippet from Windows Weekly. If you want to see more and want to catch the whole show, you can subscribe in your favorite podcast client or visit our website, twit.tv/WW. And of course, there's links right below me.